So DJ the Infinite Gamer had left a comment where he had basically pointed out that he felt like all this multiversal madness would kind of lead into, or at least has something to do with Kang. And that's something that I've been wondering about recently, right, with this whole thing. But before we get into that, we do need to thank our sponsor for this video, Atlas VPN. So for those of you guys who do not know, right now at this moment, and this is an absolutely insane deal, Atlas VPN is running this massive discount, right? It means you can get like a 3-year subscription for just $1.99 a month, for $2 a month. And they've got like a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's insane. You don't need to know much about VPNs to know that's an insane deal. So for those of you guys who don't know what a VPN is, this means virtual private network. And what it means is that when you have Atlas VPN activated on your devices, your laptop or your desktop or your phone, your internet traffic is funneled through essentially an encrypted tunnel, meaning no one can really see what you're actually doing. So it can protect you from like spying, public Wi-Fi issues, and it hides your IP address and your online activities. Now, one of the huge benefits of having a VPN is the issue of geo-restriction. For those of you guys who don't know what that means, sometimes streaming services will have programming set up which is only available in certain regions. So if you're in the United States, you may not be able to see programming that's actually available on Netflix in Canada. But with Atlas VPN, you can actually bypass all of that, which basically means that you can see content on streaming services that is not readily available to you. So again, right now, at this moment, Atlas VPN is running this massive discount, right? It means you can get like a 3-year subscription for $2 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So time's running out. Make sure you get your deal by clicking the link in the video description below. And with that being said, let's get back into our video. But yeah, so here's what I've been wondering. How does Kang the Conqueror tie into this? Because I know that at the end of the whole 10-year arc, right, the Infinity Saga, that Feige and them came out and they said, we're not doing any more 10-year arcs, right? We're not doing that anymore. Instead, it's just gonna be 3 to 5-year arcs that are gonna be small and self-contained. But I'm really hoping that like this all kind of leads into Kang. And maybe it's just coming out of the last 10 years that I can't really see the MCU doing it any other way. That like at the end of the first Avengers movie, we got like the teaser for Thanos. And then it was just small little things over the course of the remaining films that led into like the Infinity Gauntlet and all that kind of stuff. And each one of the teasers became more and more significant until it was basically like, yeah, man, so the whole thing with like, you know, Infinity War and Avengers Endgame is all basically just the Infinity Gauntlet, with a couple other things thrown in. And that's basically it, right? Maybe it's just me kind of coming out of that 10-year period and expecting that I look at this idea of Kang the Conqueror and it's kind of like, okay, how does all this tie in? Because here's the thing. When you look at these characters, and again, we're kind of borrowing from comics here, but when you look at these characters, and even just looking at them in the MCU, the build-up to Thanos was immense, right? The build-up to Thanos was amazing. And it was one of those things where when we got the post-credit scene at the end of Avengers, right? And like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, to fight them is to court death, and then Thanos turns around and smiles. It's like, yes, you know, Thanos, Mistress Death, all that kind of stuff. And while we didn't necessarily get Mistress Death in the traditional sense, the way that we wanted to, although looking at that post-credit scene, it looks like the early idea was to go in that direction, and then ultimately they just kind of changed it up, made it a little more grounded for the MCU as opposed to Thanos walking around with some chick who just smokes cigarettes all day listening to The Cure, crying about how hard the world is and how she's just so misunderstood by the world, you know, that kind of thing. So they ended up going with the direction of like the Infinity Gauntlet and all that, but the build up to like Infinity War and Avengers Endgame was big. And even when they did, what was it, was it the Phase 3 announcement? You guys remember that video that came out when they announced like Black Panther and all that stuff and everybody went nuts, where Feige was talking about how like everything that they were doing had led to that point, where he was like, you know, everything since like the first Avengers movie has led to this, which according to the recent interviews was a bunch of malarkey. Apparently they have no plan. They're just making movies with Marvel characters, and that's basically it. Which, if that's true, that would kind of explain what's going on with Kang, because we're not getting the same kind of build up with Kang that we got with Thanos. And what's so ironic here is Kang is a far more legitimate threat than Thanos is. Thanos is just a guy who is a nihilist, believes life is meaningless, he's down bad for Mistress Death, and is always doing everything he can to try to like court her favor. As some people call him, the ultimate simp. I don't know if I agree with that term, but nonetheless, Thanos has pretty simple motivations. There's not really a whole lot to him. And while Kang has some relatively simple motivations too, anybody out there who is familiar with comics will tell you, a a guy who can travel back and forth through the time stream is a far more credible threat than a guy that can assemble some magic rocks in a glove and blink out half the life in the universe. That Kang is a far bigger threat than Thanos is, because at any point in time, unless Thanos is in possession of the Mind Stone, at any point in time, Kang can go back in time and just stop Thanos from being born, or he can just capture the Infinity Gauntlets at the beginning of everything, right? When like Nemesis first created them, if you go that route, or where like they first came into existence, snatch them all up, take them to the future, and nobody can ever use them again. Right? I mean, there's a variety of ways in which Kang can just totally distort the time stream by just moving back and forth through time. Not only that, looking at what he has in the future, all that technology, that super advanced armor, I mean, Kang is really, really powerful. There's a lot more to him than a guy who can manipulate time. And so I feel like there should be a lot more build up to Kang than what we're getting right now. That it's just kind of like, hey guys, so we're at the end of Loki, basically Sylvie killed He Who Remains, or Nathaniel, or whatever you want to call him, killed him, and now like Kang is the one who created the TVA and is running the show, and we'll see you in Quantumania. And it's just kind of like, no, I mean, come on. Like, we should have more build up for Kang the Conqueror than what we're seeing right now. This guy should be appearing in post-credit scenes. Now, looking at what's going on in Doctor Strange 2, looking at like the Illuminati universe is what it seems to be. There's a lot of theories, because I kind of broke down and I did some Google searching this morning, and I kind of feel bad, because I feel like now my ideas are, at least aren't original to me, even if like they're not original at all, like, now they're not original to me. But one of the plot leaks that came out is that the multiversal Illuminati basically stem from like the Illuminati universe, right? Where in a lot of ways it looks like the Great Society from like the Incursions, right? What is it? Earth 429, a bunch of zeros and then a 1, somewhere in there. Those in some capacity, those numbers are arranged in such a way to where it represents that universe. I get a little fuzzy on the numerical designations for universes, but it looks very similar to the Great Society. For those guys who don't know what that is, basically during the Kree-Skrull War, the traditional superheroes who were called the archetypes of justice were basically killed. They failed in trying to repel the Kree-Skrull War, and instead what you got was the Great Society, which was basically the Justice League, and they in turn went forward and saved everything, and then just kind of became the superheroes of that world. And while I wouldn't say the Illuminati like represent the Justice League in the MCU, what I mean to say is that it's kind of like this perfect world, so to speak, right? Where like, I don't know if it'd be considered a utopia, but like they came out on top, and they've quelled all the major threats and all that kind of stuff. So you get like the Iron Legion by hopefully Tom Cruise Iron Man, and so on and so forth. And supposedly that's the world where Wanda visits herself, and like where her kids are in the trailer, it's in that world, and that apparently Wanda ends up seizing control of herself. Again, these are leaks, rumors. I don't know how much of this stuff is actually true, and we won't know until the movie comes out. But the thing about this is, I feel like, sure, that kind of stuff is cool, but that's a great chance to show like some involvement with Kang. I know a lot of people are speculating that the whole fight scene that takes place between Wanda and a person who looks like Captain Marvel, a lot of people are saying like they hope that it's basically Iron Lad, that it's a version of Kang before he becomes Kang, which is actually what happened in the comics, that Kang visited his younger self and told him like, you're destined to become me. And his younger self was like, but I don't want to. So he became a hero and started calling himself Iron Lad. That's essentially how that character exists, right? Iron Lad explained in 5 seconds. So that's basically it. A lot of people are hoping that's the case, and I have to believe that beyond the fact that it just seems cool, that hope stems from the fact that like we have so little exposure to Kang the Conqueror in the MCU, right? It's just, he is a guy who conquered the multiverse at some point, or at least was part of a giant war that broke out, and now he seemingly rules it. And we have no idea what he's doing, right? We have no clue what's going on. So I feel like what's going on in the MCU right now, assuming that Doctor Strange doesn't give us anything, are just some hugely missed opportunities to show us what Kang is doing, and to give us this idea of just how credible of a threat Kang is, how dangerous this guy is. Because what I really don't want to see here, what I'm really hoping does not happen here, is that the only inference we got to the nature of Kang was in the Loki TV show, and that He Who Remains died, and the sacred timeline merged with the rest of the multiverse, and now Kang basically is ruling everything by himself, right? Or at least is sitting at the end of time, right? So might as well be ruling it. I mean, we saw how He Who Remains manipulated the sacred timeline by getting rid of people who deviated from their quote-unquote path basically. What I'm really hoping is that's not the only reference we get. Then he shows up in Quantumania, he fights like Ant-Man and company for a little while, they win, and then that's it. I'm really hoping that's not the case, because here's the thing, Kang is a guy where you could have him as an overarching villain for quite some time. And if that really is the case, I think that speaks largely to one of the biggest issues of the MCU. And I've talked about this before, and I don't mind talking about it again. They always get rid of the best villains, right? Kang is a villain that you could have for like a series of phases, right? For like phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for whichever ones come after this, right? However many they end up doing after this before they decide to call it quits. Kang could be a villain for a bunch of different phases. In the same way that like this Civil War event could have been like an entire phase that stretched all throughout these movies, right? Like imagine if you had Civil War, it's like a whole phase, and then you've got the Captain America movie tie into Civil War. And you've got the Iron Man movie tie into Civil War, right? You could introduce villains, and they could have drastically expanded the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They should have done Civil War later than they did, because the movie was more like civil disagreement, right? Captain America 3, civil disagreement, right? I mean, those memes where it's like Iron Man and Captain America, and it's something ridiculous, and then like the third panel is Civil War, that's not far off from being an accurate criticism of Civil War. It was a fun movie, but it should have been done later, and there should have been a lot more going on there. But having said that, I mean, I feel like Kang could be that, right? He could be this guy that just stretches on for a series of movies, all of which tie into him. Because I'm not gonna lie, I kind of miss the days, the first 10 years, when we would have like Thanos is the main bad guy, Thanos is coming, and it's just like this little tidbit here, and this little thing there, and that little thing there, and that little thing there. And when you go back and you watch them, it all just kind of leads into this great big huge thing. I understand things change, and I'm not adverse to things changing. What I would really like to see, though, is that because Kang represents such a credible threat in general, a guy who can manipulate the time stream and control it, I would like to see them treat him like more of a credible threat. And I would like to see him more than just a guy who fights the cast of Ant-Man in probably the quantum realm, and then he gets defeated and that's the end of the movie. Because if that really is just the life and times of Kang, that's all it ever really amounts to, I feel it would be incredibly lackluster. So let me know what you guys think. Am I overthinking this, right? Do you guys think that Kang is going to have a much bigger role in the MCU outside of him just fighting Scott Lang and friends in Quantumania? Or do you think he's just going to be like just a simple one-off villain, right? It's going to be like, yep, he's part of the new MCU plan of them having some kind of a villain over the course of like 3 or 4 years, and then he's going to die and that's going to be it, and it'll basically be a great big huge villain who was billed as a credible threat, had no real lead up, and then died in a single film. Do you guys think that's what's going to happen? I really hope it's not. Maybe Loki season 2 will give us a better idea of what's going on with Kang, but I really feel like this should be a guy that has a lot more attention going to him than what he's getting right now. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.